Hi, are you looking for a solution to the buyer agent fee problem that has been arisen and created by the NAR, National Association of Realtors settlement proposal that came out on a Friday in March of 2024? If that's something you're looking for and you're trying to figure out a different way to handle that, then you're in the right place. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Hi, I'm Mike Cerrone with Mastermind Agent, and I'm going to share with you just a quick concept on how I kind of see this thing breaking out. It's just a potential option with nobody knows. Everything's theoretical right now. But let me show you what I've got. I'm going to show you my screen. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek. And let's get that up for you right about now. You should be seeing my screen, and hopefully that's clear for you. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to open up the slideshow, make that even prettier. Here we go. Let's walk through this. It's going to be real fast. So again, this is the NAR settlement proposal of March of 2024. And I think this is a potential buyer agent fee solution. I want to make a quick disclosure for you. This presentation is only for educational purposes and not legal advice. All right, seek that elsewhere. This is just a thought exercise to stimulate potential solutions. So seek advice from your broker and/or attorney before attempting any of these ideas. These are just my opinions and not legal advice and thoughts. All right, now that that's done, let's go ahead and jump in and give you a problem and then maybe a solution. So the problem, I'm going to pull out some text from the NAR settlement fact sheet that they put out, and you can find it at this link. Just also can go into Google and type in NAR settlement fact sheet and you'll get to it. Here are the two items that I pull out and look at, and I think are the primary issues in there. Number one, NAR has agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting, stopping, preventing offers of compensation on the MLS. All right, and that's going to go into effect mid-July of 2024 if it all gets ratified. Remember, it's only a proposal at this point. But if this does go through, again, this is the key issue or challenge for most folks and what is going to change our industry, quite honestly. Now, everybody has a different spin on whether it's going to be good or bad. It all kind of depends on your view and where you sit at the table. But this is what it is. It's going to be prohibiting offers of compensation on the MLS. It could happen elsewhere, but not on the MLS. But that's how we've been doing it for a long time. And that's kind of a centralized location. So it does create a challenge. I'm going to show you how I think you can make this work with this in place if that were to happen. Number two, this is just something you need to know. Here it is, again, more text coming out of the fact sheet. The settlement provides that the MLS participants working with buyers must enter into written representation agreements with those buyers. And they said in there, and I don't see it here, but before you look at the first house. Okay, that's a key, and it was in that statement somewhere. I just didn't make it into my form, but it's before you look at the first house. That's critical that you have your buyer agency agreement written up or whatever your arrangement's going to be with that buyer and your compensation agreement with them. And again, that change is going to happen about mid-July of 2024. By the way, this doesn't scare me at all. I've been doing this for 30 years. All the way back in 1993, I'm in Colorado. We had buyer agency come into effect in our state. And so my entire career, I just have always had a buyer sign a buyer agency agreement before I took them out to look at any properties. It's not difficult. You're going to explain what your offers of service are. You're going to ask them to sign. That's another discussion. But anyway, I wanted you to know that. Keep in mind, this is all proposed settlements and the terms may change. All right, let's get into what I think is going to fall out of this. Let's talk about the result, complications, and fee sources. So after the change, most listing agents will not negotiate a buyer fee into the listing agreement. This is going to be one of the big changes that's going to happen. Again, let me share that again. I believe that because the fact that the MLS is not going to allow you to post any compensation out there, and because listing agents are going to be competitive, listing agents will no longer be negotiating a buyer fee into their commission that they're going to get from the seller. They're only going to be looking out for their part or their half. People have talked about the decoupling. That's the concept, decoupling the commissions, just pulling the commissions apart and talking about a seller side and a buyer side commission. And so that's what we're going to see here, I believe, is listing agents will not negotiate the buyer agent fee into the listing agreement. I know I said that 3 times. I want you to get that because that plays into the rest of this. So buyer agents are going to have to get their fee from one of 3 sources. One is coming directly from the buyer, either paid at closing or outside of closing. Two is go back to that listing broker and negotiate a commission from them if for some reason they either had an old commission set up or they're currently still going to be doing a traditional arrangement that we've seen prior to this change. And if that happens, though, you're going to have to create a separate agreement off of the MLS. You're going to have to contact that listing agent and talk to them about anything they've set up and get something in writing from them to indicate that they will compensate you because it's not in the MLS. Next, seller. The third place you could get the fee from is the seller, and that would be negotiated at the time of offer as a term of sale. It may be some combination of the three, not likely, but it could be some combination of maybe two of the three. Who knows how it's all going to play out? But those are the sources of where the buyer agent's fee could come from. All right. And warning, any of these solutions will require a written agreement, okay, that is going to need to be prepared by an attorney and or provided by your broker. I don't think you should be writing up these agreements because they're making agreements between your brokerage and the party. So be very careful about that. And again, every state has different laws and rules. Make sure you're getting an attorney involved so you're compliant. All right, with that said, let's look at a solution I think is going to play out. Here's what I believe is going to happen. Buyer agent commissions are going to become part of the contract negotiation between the buyer and seller. This is what everybody seems to be pushing. I think this is going to happen this way. And I think the way to now conceptually think about this and start moving forward is that the buyer is going to instruct the seller to pay the buyer agent a sales commission of X at closing. Now, that is not going to be the language in the contract. That's why you need to get the attorney, okay? So don't use the text I just gave you. Get an attorney to create the language and do it properly for your state, because I can already see holes in the way I wrote it. But I'm trying to get you to get the idea. You need to have the idea to go again in front of your attorney or with your broker to get this right. But this is the idea. The buyer in the negotiation is going to instruct the seller to pay the buyer's agent a sales commission, which I think is very important to call it a sales commission of X, whatever that is, whether it's a flat amount, percentage, whatever it is. You got to be very clear here. That's why I say you got to need the attorney to help you write it out. But at closing, and they're going to add a whole bunch more language. Start to focus on what's happening here. The buyer is instructing the seller to do something that they can do in a contract, right? The buyer could tell the seller to pay for, in the old days, to have carpet put in by XYZ contractor prior to closing and pay for it. Okay, that would be an example. Or pay for the title work, or any, there's all kinds of things. Pay for $3,000 of their closing costs, right? They can instruct, the buyer can instruct the seller to do things as part of that agreement, right? Get the idea? Okay, so the buyer is going to instruct the seller to pay the buyer agent a sales commission of X at closing. And by labeling it, by the way, a sales commission, I think it's going to be very important to get this language right. It may solve the problem of using the buyer's potential seller concession to pay for their broker, the buyer's broker, and instead leave those funds for financing assistance like they're intended to do or the way they're handled today. So some people try to solve this problem by saying, hey, let's use those seller concessions to pay for the buyer agent. Well, you may be able to pull that off, but now the buyer has no, especially a cash-strapped buyer, first-time home buyer, any buyer that's strapped for cash, who's needing some assistance for some of the closing costs from the seller. If you use those up to pay the buyer's agent, there's no money left to help them get the financing, and now the deal's not going to close. So that's why I think it's very important to call it a sales commission, because traditionally lenders have looked at a sales commission being paid by the seller as just part of the transaction. So I think that's what's going to play out here, or some form of that. And again, this will be done inside the purchase contract negotiations, and it probably happen in either additional provisions, depending on what your contract calls it in your state, or I think initially, it's going to be like a contract addendum. Again, your broker or an attorney or your attorney, depending on where you are in the pecking order, whether you're an agent or whether you're a broker or where you are, you're going to have one of these parties help you out and create an addendum first to go to the contract, get moving fast. And eventually, I think what's going to happen is that it's going to become formalized in a standard contract you use in your area. So for instance, I'm in Colorado, the state, our real estate commission puts together our contracts, which is really nice, but I recognize that other states don't do that. And so it may be your MLS board or a brokerage, depending on your local custom. Now I went ahead and I wanted to put together something visual that you could see for this idea. Maybe it'll help with the concept. So here's the old way, a buyer agent getting paid by the listing broker. We've got a couple different things going on here. We've got these four parties, right? We got the seller's broker, and then we got the buyer and the buyer's broker on the other side. And traditionally what's happened is the seller has paid the seller's broker, the listing agent, X amount as a commission. And then that listing agent, that seller's broker, is going to turn around and pay the buyer's broker part of the commission, right? That's how it's traditionally happened in most areas. That's the way it looks. Okay, here's what I think it's going to look like in the new way, and the way you can now get it in your mind so you can describe it to your people, because you're going to have to describe this to a seller and a buyer and help them out, and of course get your own understanding first. I believe the buyer agent is going to get paid by the seller and instructed by the buyer. So it's going to look like this. We've got the same parties. We've got the seller, the seller's broker, the buyer's broker, and the buyer. Here's what's going to happen. We're still going to have the seller pay the seller's broker, but you'll notice it's a smaller amount. It's just the listing fee. And then the buyer broker says, hey, I need to get paid. And so they're going to tell the buyer, hey, pay me. And now at this point is where it's going to get interesting, because the buyer in the contract is going to instruct that seller and say, hey, pay my buyer broker. And remember, that was negotiated during the purchase contract. So now we're sitting here at the closing, and the instructions are going into effect. And the seller, oops, let me go through the other way. There we go. And then the seller is going to go ahead and pay the buyer's broker, right? So the funds are still coming from the seller, from the proceeds of the sale. It's just that it's going to get split into two from the seller's part, not the seller gives a big portion over to the listing broker, and the listing broker then chops it up and pays a portion over to the buyer's broker. Instead, the seller is going to pay their listing agent or the seller's broker a part, but then the seller is going to pay the other part directly over to the buyer's broker. I think that's the way you might want to visualize it and describe it and explain it to a potential seller or buyer, and let them know up front, by the way, before you ever get to a closing, what is going to happen and how this is all going to play out. Hopefully this has been very helpful for you, and I hope that you like this. And maybe it kind of gave you an idea of how to move forward with this big challenge. We're all going to get through this, by the way. We're all going to get through it. Just nobody knows exactly how it's going to play out yet. But this is a potential idea that I think has a lot of legs and possibility, and it solves problems on every level. I can't think of a solution, a situation where this wouldn't be a solution, but maybe you can. You put them down in the comments if you think of something I haven't thought of where there's a hang up with this concept. If you like this, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, a like on the video. Really appreciate that. If you want to see more information like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And again, I hope this has been helpful. You keep moving forward. Take care. Bye for now.